All right, guys, so got a sweet video coming at you today going over Terrence's split leading up to this year's Arnold and Olympia. Before I tell you all the sweet details, don't forget to hit that like, subscribe button, share with some friends. I appreciate you guys helping me grow this channel. And the more it grows, the more sweet free content you get. So it's a pretty good deal for everybody. But anyway, for anyone missing some of the context on this, I've talked about this in other videos. So if you've watched every single one, first off, thank you. Second off, sorry if there's a little bit of repetitiveness, but I want people to know that. I've been working with Terrence on and off for 5+ years now, something along those lines. I think we kind of kicked up and were able to take his physique to that next level. Some of it, honestly, definitely not trying to take more credit than there actually is. Terrence does 99.9% of the work. You really can't replace a growth mindset, adherence, work ethic. Those things are a necessity. And then all I try and do is obviously support all of those things, basically. And so again, when we first started, a lot of things were just working on getting the most out of his movements, cleaning up form, teaching him how to take some sets further, stuff like that. And then a lot of it now, we really have just a whole lot of dialogue figuring everything out. So it's not me saying, hey, here's exactly what we're doing. We have a discussion about kind of what the game plan is, and then we basically see if it looks good on paper, and then we go through it. And as we go through it, we will make changes, and again, just make changes as we go. So that's the other thing I want to go through with all this, is again, I always think there's a lot of information out there that is out of context on social media. Everyone's an expert. Everyone's very good at writing stuff, talking about stuff or whatever. I don't really consider myself much of an influencer. I don't know what that is. And in case you're new, I've been working full-time as a trainer since 2006. It's the only way I've ever made a profession, made a living. So all of my context comes from actually training people in person. That's what I'm better at than anything else. Hopefully try and convey some information pretty well, be a good communicator. But it's really just coming down to what actually produces results with people in person. So a lot of the stuff, people will pretend that things are very exacting. Here's the exact split, the exact, reps in reserve or the exact volume that you need and all that kind of stuff. And I just see things through a different lens where, again, all that's great if we were working with robots where everyone was exactly the same, everyone adhered the same, everyone performed the same, everyone's body was the same. But there's literally hundreds of moving parts that are involved with being a human and not training robots. So as that's the case, all the stuff that's on paper, all the X's and O's, it's not that big of a deal. And it really all goes to the filter of how it's actually going. Things change from person to person. Things change with the same person from prep to prep. So again, it's all just, I'm trying to be very transparent about here's how we come to these conclusions. It's not something that I actually got a protractor out for or a calculator out. Just obviously, hopefully based on some solid principles, then put on place, put in action, and then just adjust it basically as we go. We really auto-regulate, day to day, week to week with how Terrence is feeling, how he's responding. In case y'all don't know, John Meadows does all of his nutrition, supplementation. So there's always communication basically to some degree between the three of us with how's his recovery, how are things going, where's his food at. And again, it's not something where it's, again, I think people in hypertrophy world and muscle building world sell periodization now a lot as something very, very fancy. In and of itself isn't bad. Periodization just means basically depending on where your body's at, depending on your recovery, depending on what your goals are, your training should change to some degree based off of those things, which I agree with 100%. But people like to sell these pre-made, here's these phases we're going through, ahead of time because it looks good, it's very pretty, it's nicely packaged. But with an individual, I think it should be to some degree adjusted day to day, week to week. And sometimes it's a lot of adjustments over a couple months, and sometimes it's very little adjustments over a couple months. And again, because so much of it is based on performance and recovery, why would somebody have the exact same thing occurring predetermined for 16 weeks if someone's recovery is, a 7.5 out of 10, or someone's literally a 10 out of 10? Some people might not need to periodize the stuff a whole lot if their recovery day to day is amazing. So anyway, with all of Terrence's stuff, the main goals that we have still is his body just keeps getting more and more and more balanced. I started to say, basically last year, prior to the year before, as soon as we started training in person every single day is where I really think I've been able to help support Terrence take his body to the next level, to his two best placings past year, getting second at the Arnold, second at the Olympia. Obviously that's one placing away from what our goal is, as good as you can get. So, part of the thought is, was maybe Terrence just doing the Olympia. But honestly, that decision is completely up to him. And obviously, John has a huge influence in that as well, too. And Terrence wants to win the Arnold. And why the hell not? We want to win the Olympia and we want to win the Arnold. So instead of focusing purely on the Olympia and obviously just trying to peak just for that, we're going to try and win the Arnold. And then we're going to go try and win the Olympia after that. That's really the goal. And everybody, likes to stir the pot and this and that and who shows up and all this and that. And it's kind of cliche, but the reality is you're competing against yourself. We're not going to change our actions based on anyone. We're just going to try and beat the last Terrence that was on stage and let the chips fall as they may. Literally, it's by far the best Terrence ever at the Olympia. Chris Bumstead just happened to show up and look the absolute best he's ever looked. Probably one of the biggest changes I've seen in an athlete from one year to the next. And kudos to him because he deserved to win. I mean, both Terrence and I discussing afterwards, people like to say politics or this or that or whatever. And sometimes even though you're trying to get that number one spot, people just show up. I just joke, it's like when Ronnie was showing up during his era. It's like, it's not that anybody wasn't working hard or doing everything the best they possibly could. Ronnie showed up. And so again, the change that Bumstead brought from, previous year, 19 to 2020, was a well-deserved win. And we just think hopefully if we keep bringing better versions of Terrence, do I think a best version of Terrence is capable of beating Bumstead? Of course. That's why we're competing. I don't think Terrence would keep competing if he thought he was just going to get second every single time. But the same thing, that's said with respect and the reality of, again, bring the best Terrence, and it's up to judges. I mean, it doesn't really matter what I say or what I do. It all comes down to judges' opinions, and we'll always respect that. So the goal from a physique standpoint, even though he keeps getting more and more balanced, is still to bring up a little bit of hamstrings, bring up a little bit of arms, and just in general, a little bit of overall upper body size. Terrence's lower body, especially quads, adductors, respond really, really well. It's got, in my opinion, the best quads on the Olympia stage. So again, we're just trying to bring up everything to match that a little bit. Luckily, he's got probably one of the best backs on stage as well, too. So we just kind of want to bring up everything to match those body parts. And I know him and John will bring conditioning. So the split that we're going with now, again, I guess for lack of a better word or better description, is a modified push-pull lower. And so how it's going to look on paper is the first, we're going to go 3 days in a row. So starting on a Monday, and obviously we'll adjust as needed, but we're going through a push 1, which means the first push day, a pull 1, and then lower. So 3 days in a row of training. That's going to be the whole body trained within those 3 days. Then an off day, and then we're going to go through a second pull day and a second push day, and then an off day. So basically training 5 days and taking 2 off in a 7-day period of time. And really the goal of that is the pull and push. The first ones are going to look more like a typical push-pull lower, where we're starting with bigger movements. So on a push day, we're going to start with chest, and then we're going to go to delts, and then we're going to finish with triceps. The second rotation through is going to look a little bit different. We've had in the past arm days. We've had in the past delt days. And I think you need that. Prioritize those priority body parts, especially for Terrence, to bring them up to match everything else. But I want to touch on a little bit more upper body on those days as well, too. So again, as we come through the pull and the push the second days, you'll see we're going to start with the smaller body parts. So on the pull day, we're going to start with biceps. On the push day, we're going to start with triceps and then move to delts and then finish with some more isolated stuff for back and for chest at the end of those days. And the reality is, so it's almost like basically still having an arm day and still having a little bit of a delt day prioritized with just a little bit of touching on some back and chest stuff again towards the end. And this is one of those things I think it's good because, like I said, I want to hit a little bit more back frequency, a little bit more chest frequency, while still not taking away from the priority that is really arms at this point in time. So walking through, looking at some of this is where it's at right now. I guarantee some of this will change. And as stuff changes, I'll kind of let you guys know as we change as we go along. And that's all going to be based on as Terrence and I go through stuff. All these are movements and things we've done before. So seeing how it fits, seeing how we progress. And if we need to adjust as we go along, we will adjust as we go along. So pull day first. A big difference here is I've moved our RDL, our deadlift variation, from lower body to pull day. So we're going to start still prioritizing the more upper back stuff as, I would consider RDL as more of obviously a hip exercise, but also an erector exercise. But we're still starting with lat upper back focus. So single arm pull down variation, moving into chest supported T-bar row, then moving into a banded RDL. From there, we're going into the prime extreme row, which is basically kind of just a little bit more like an upper back row. I say it's very similar to a hammer strength low row. So a little bit more upper back focus. Of course, some lats working there as well too. And then finishing with standing cable curls and reverse pec deck. That's all the meat and potato stuff. Those will be movements that we track, that we logbook, that we try and progress. The start place for volume on all of that is going to be 2 working sets. So in a typical top set, and as we go through some of the workouts, you'll see some variations on this, but top sets tend to be anywhere from that 5 to 8 rep range, and then back off sets can be anywhere from 10 upwards sometimes of 15 rep range, some body parts even a little bit higher. But that's what I would consider working sets. All those sets are taken to failure, which in my opinion is the most efficient way to accumulate effective reps, keeping volume low. One of the main principles that I focus on is training is always as little as possible as far as the stimulus is concerned to produce maximal results. And I think volume is the most taxing on recovery, not necessarily intensity or force production, which you'll get training to failure. So I prefer to go a lower volume training style, just because that seems to be as little as possible to produce results. But we'll taper up as needed. So lots of times when Terrence's recovery is really good and we're getting a lot out of what we're doing, we'll taper it up. I think especially towards the beginning of a prep, that makes a lot of sense because you can get some more output from your workouts from a caloric standpoint and potentially still get a little bit more effective stimulus, which could lead to more hypertrophy, muscle building, which really is one of the few times I think people can actually recomp a bit. And obviously that depends a lot on genetics, drugs, things like that as well too. But all other things being the same, natty enhanced, all that, beginning of a prep, calories high, I think bumping the volume a little bit if you can recover it is probably one of the best ways, again, to recomp, especially if your calories are right around what's on paper a maintenance or slight surplus, and then bumping up your output actually might put you into that slight, maintenance deficit back and forth spot, again, which can allow you to put on a little bit of tissue, drop a little bit of body fat at the same time. So that is our pull day one. Push day one, as of right now, incline dumbbell press, roller flies, high incline Smith to the point where it's basically an overhead press, cuff laterals for mainly side delts. We're going to do some sort of cable cross extension, maybe a rope extension there. Those are stuff we always just listen to Terrence's elbows, see what feels best and run with that. And for some calves, we're going to do a standing Smith machine calf raise on that day. Then moving into lower body day, this is one we're still finalizing as we go through the first time. We'll probably tweak and go, but definitely started with seating leg curls, both of our favorite exercises for hamstrings. Then from there, going into a squat pattern. That's what we're going to figure out, probably either the pendulum or a hack squat. Again, we'll see how Terrence goes on that one. And then from there, there'll be lying leg curls and a split squat variation. And then we'll probably have some prowler work, some other stuff towards the end. But that's the on-paper start. Same thing. Those are going to be the main meat and potato ones, the ones we track, we log, progress. With all of these, we'll probably just focus on those movements to start. I won't add in a whole lot of metabolic or pump work until I see how well we're progressing on these. And again, if Terrence is recovering very well, then I will generally probably add in some, pump metabolic work, whatever you want to call it, towards the end of the session. Again, in my opinion, another way to have effective volume if it's taken close to failure. From there, we have, again, an off day, and then we go on pull day two. And so pull day two will look like a single arm preacher variation. That'll probably either machine or free weight, ultimately maybe both. Some sort of hammer curl variation, which will probably be a cable to start. And then maybe one more curl variation after that. I'm really going to see how the pace of that workouts and how much time we have and how effective everything is. So maybe 2 to 3 exercises. Sometimes I like to incorporate more of a pronated grip curl in there as well too. And then from there, we're going to do, for some back work, we'll have a cable rear delt. So again, the two big ones for rear delts will be one, the reverse pec deck on pull day one. Pull day two, we'll have cable rear delts as the big rear delt movement. And then from there, some sort of rope pullover. So a cable wrap rope pullover. If you had a pullover machine, that'd be a great place to put it. So again, when we're doing extra lat and bat work, it's not going to be things that are super taxing on recovery. Because again, at the end of the day, if I'm trying to put some snatch grip RDLs or something in that place, over the whole course of the week, it might be a little bit too much. So when I'm saying we're going to add in a little extra back and chest work, it's generally going to start with something more isolated and maybe one compoundy type thing. But again, nothing that's too taxing on output. One, again, from like a total systemic recovery thing, but also from a joint thing. If we're just putting in too much heavy rows, heavy deadlift type things, it might just be tough orthopedically as well too. Then from there, push day two. Probably starting with a JM banded Smith press, which again, just a JM is a tricep exercise variation, JM press. I like to do it on the Smith and I like to do it on the bands because I think it's a little bit more efficient. Again, some sort of cable extension. If you're new here, I love skull crushers. I love overhead extensions. My elbows and Terrence's elbows do not. And so that's a thing you'll tend to see with bigger guys. And obviously most of the guys I work with are a lot bigger than me. It's very tough to make those exercises fit. So that we do a lot of single arm work. We do a lot of cable work. Because again, if we trash elbows, which I know all about, having done it personally, doing those exercises, and have worked with a lot of athletes that have had that happen, if you don't preserve your elbows, you can't train, obviously, your arms hard, you can't train shoulders hard, you can't train back hard, you can't train chest hard. Again, eventually your elbows will just degenerate. So again, if it gets to the point where it goes from pain to 10 out of 10 pain to actually having some sort of injury, obviously you can't train anything. So from a longevity standpoint, that's why we do so much single arm stuff in there. From there, another lateral raise variation, likely Cuffs, again, might just change the angle on that just for the sake of not being the exact same pattern. Again, more from a joint standpoint than an actual muscle standpoint. A cable fly variation. So again, I might actually do probably a roller again, but maybe have that one slightly more of an incline. Again, those are things that we'll finalize as we actually go through that second push day. And then from there, we're going to have a Smith incline press. So probably somewhere around a low incline, 15 to 30 degree incline for chest. And then we'll do another calf variation, probably a hip-loaded calf variation. So we've got a little calf sled, but you could always do a leg press from there as well, too. The only thing I didn't write on the split, which you guys will see some days, is occasionally some forearm work and some ab work. Terrence has been doing ab work all on his own pretty much every single day. Some of it is just waist control, so some of it's vacuums, hitting his poses, but some of it's some crunch work, a little bit of oblique work, leg raises, things like that. And again, I think that stuff is... frequency is king on that. If you need bigger abs, you need to progress things the same as any other exercise, but a lot of it just for control is about endurance. How long can you keep your waist in, small and tight? How much can you repeat that? How frequently can you repeat that? And that will really translate to being able to do that a long time on stage. So that's the overview. And again, for if I didn't clarify it through every single day, most of the kind of baseline volume now is 2 working sets for every single exercise. And again, it's very possible over the next 4 to 6 to even 8 weeks, depending on how high Terrence's food stays, we will progress the volume a little bit in there, sometimes with working sets. So an additional working set instead of 2, we do 3. But then sometimes with some metabolic and pump work as well, too. And again, all that stuff is implement, see how his body changes, respond, see how his recovery is, and then adjust literally daily and weekly from there. So hopefully, we'll have a lot more content coming along, documenting a lot leading up to the Arnold first. So the time frame, again, for those, if I didn't say, is maybe 12 weeks or so, a little over 12 weeks from the Arnold. I think a little over 14 weeks from the Olympia, so they're about 2 weeks apart. And again, from a training standpoint, we'll talk about how things kind of taper down into a show and what I change. And then from Arnold to the Olympia, obviously we're not going to make any changes in Terrence's physique. The biggest thing is to actually just maintain what we can the best and allow his body to recover the best at that point in time. We want him looking fresh and recovered coming to a show. If you beat the shit out of yourself into a show, your whole body is inflamed, you will look like shit. So at some point in time, as much as it's cool to be hardcore, again, having a 2-week period of time from Arnold to the Olympia, there will be no game plan changes as far as what are we doing from a muscle standpoint. You know, him and his coach John might have some game plan changes from nutrition, from off days, from recovery, whatever. But again, from a training standpoint, you know, people will be like, oh, what are you going to change from the Arnold to the Olympia, if anything? And you can't change anything from an amount of muscle standpoint. The only thing you can change from that point in time is short-term stuff. Maybe a little change in body fat, probably not realistic because Terrence will be stage ready for the Arnold. But maybe things like fullness, water retention, those are things you'll manipulate. And like I said, having him look fresh and recovered, I'll really be making sure that that's a time where as little as possible is a big thing. What do we need to give him to tell his body to hold on to tissue, to not lose tissue, but to also have him looking recovered and fresh when he gets on stage for the Olympia? And the reality is it doesn't always work exactly like this, but we'd want, the best version of Terrence for the Arnold and maybe even a slightly more best version of Terrence for the Olympia. But again, that's a lot of stuff honestly falls a lot more, with Terrence and John than it does with me and training type stuff. So hope you guys enjoy getting this look at this. And like I said, I'll be posting more and more of these workouts as we go through them, and hopefully giving you guys a lot of good content. There's some stuff that you guys want to see more of. I had some people request for some more posing stuff, so maybe I'll incorporate some more of that through this prep. I consider myself, because of the people I've learned from, very good at teaching mandatories, and I really, really suck at putting together very impressive and good posing routines. So again, even when we have someone in here, I will actually give a lot of feedback on people hitting their mandatories, moving from quarter turns and all that good stuff. But I'm not good at transitioning, choreography, putting all that stuff together. But luckily, I happen to train with the best poser in the world, in my opinion. So maybe I'll get some more feedback if Terrence out there, his area of expertise. Because like I said, if you're into this, if you're thinking about doing your show or doing early shows, or you're an amateur, you really should put the vast majority of your effort into your mandatories. But if you can have both great mandatories and good posing routines, that's a double bonus. But at the amateur level, people don't lose shows over not having good posing routines. But you can lose a show or lose out on placings if you don't know how to present your physique properly within the mandatories. Anything else you guys want to see, hit me with some comments and some feedback below, and I'll definitely take it into consideration. As long as it's nothing too weird, then I'm all for giving you guys whatever information you guys want to see. So as always, appreciate you guys. If you didn't already, like, thumbs up, That's the same thing, right? So do it twice, sure, see if that works. Subscribe, tell some friends, all that good stuff. And until the next one.